thedailymass.com. Experience the Roman Catholic Mass from historic St. Louis Cathedral every day on thedailymass.com. His love, anywhere in the world.
Good evening, I'm Sarah McDonald.
And I'm Jason Angelette. Welcome to Issues in Faith.
Think you know the story of the Battle of New Orleans? Think again. We'll take you inside for a tour of Praying for a Miracle, the Catholic Church, and the Battle of New Orleans.
Here at the Old Ursuline Convent.
Today, you're going to get the first look at Praying for a Miracle, the Catholic Church, and the Battle of New Orleans. It's our special look at the role of prayer in the victory in the Battle of New Orleans. It's overwhelming to think that we can stand here in this chapel today on the grounds on which 200 years ago, the Ursuline sisters and Father Dubourg, and later Bishop Dubourg, and the women of New Orleans gathered to pray for the safety of the men of the city. This exhibit tells the story of the Catholic Church through voices of individuals who lived through the Battle of New Orleans. It's a tribute to the brave men who fought to defend our great city, but also to the Ursuline sisters who since 1727 have ministered to the people here in New Orleans, and of course, to our patron, Our Lady of Prompt Succor.
Our very dear brothers, while our brave warriors, under the command of the heroes of the Floridas, prepare to defend our firesides and our altars against a foreign invasion, it is for us, ministers of the Most High, and all Christians whom the feebleness of sex or age prevents from taking an active part in this important struggle, to unite under the wings of religion, to implore divine protection for the arms of our defenders.
And we are here at the Old Ursuline Convent, and specifically the Call to Prayer Room, and I'm joined by Dr. Emily Gagne Loomis, who is the Archdiocesan Director for the Archives and Records, but you also have another title. We'll get there in a minute. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
What kind of role do you take on as the Director for the Archdiocese of New Orleans, their archives and their records?
Well, you know, the records for the Archdiocese of New Orleans begin in 1718. Wow. So that's a lot of information, that's a lot of paper in the beginning. Today's world is a lot of electronics, a lot of email, etc. So the Office of Archives and Records manages all of that information, both in paper format, audio format, information as far as when it comes over the internet. Right now when we're doing Facebook, that's kind of stuff. So we have to manage all of that, and that comes underneath our realm.
Well, they gave you a new hat to wear, new title. So you're the curator of this exhibit. So tell us, what does that mean?
Because the archives has the historic information, one of the focuses is to tell the story of the Archdiocese. So what better place than to add another hat for me than to be able to tell that story.
You cut out the middleman.
We just go right to it, because you are intimately involved with the records. I mean, we do that all the time. So I know the history. The official historian for the Catholic Church, when someone has to ask questions about what happened, or you know, if the Archbishop's going out and needs information about a church or a place or something like that, they come to us and ask us for that information. So we're sort of that one-stop history shop, so it comes through us to curate for the exhibit.
So carefully handpicking you to be in charge of this, to be the curator of the exhibit. A lot of work went into making all this possible. Could you talk a little bit about what that entails?
Sure. Each year that we do a big exhibit, because we have some small ones as we throughout the year, and we do the large exhibit that runs from October through May, it takes about a year of planning. So we already know what's coming next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. So once this one's, what I want to call, I guess, in the bag, in the hat, done, ready, and everyone gets to visit it, then within 2 months I'll already be starting on the next one. So it takes about a year in planning.
Well, this took you to different places, trying to get some of the content for this. Talk a little bit about where you had to go to find some stuff.
Sure. I've been to Paris to get some things out of the Sulpician archives, which was the call to prayer that Bishop, then Father Dubourg, issued here in the city. I was in Dublin, Ireland at the National Library there to look at some letters and some documents of a young Navy officer who sent letters back to his father describing the battle.
Wow.
And who also had correspondence with Elizabeth Ann Seton, which was in Philadelphia. And then our own archives, as well as the very rich archives of the Ursuline community itself. They have probably one of the best archives for the city than anywhere else.
So tell us, why is something like this so important?
Well, you know, we are coming up on the 200th anniversary of the Battle of New Orleans. And while the battle itself is extremely significant for the city of New Orleans, there's also the other side of it. We wanted to be able to tell the church's side of it. We wanted to, and it's not one or the other, but it's to add to the story.
Absolutely,
and there's a lot of information that the church has about the battle or about what was happening in the church with the people, praying, the issue of prayer, the mandates that were going out for everyone to pray. Those are the kinds of things that you wouldn't normally get if you go to the battlefield or you go to another museum.
So if someone was to come to the exhibit, tell us some things that they would be able to see and experience.
Okay, so there are 4 major areas in the exhibit. One of them is the history and the sisters themselves, the Ursulines that arrived here in 1727, that come to this property in 1734, and then build their convents on this property. This is the second building that we're in that they built here. And it's the oldest building in the Mississippi Valley. The Ursuline Room is going to tell the story of the Ursulines getting here. There's a beautiful charcoal original by one of the sisters that was on that first boat. Her name is Marie Madeleine Hachard. She writes letters to her father, and she does this charcoal of her landing, of their landing of those 12, and it's quite extraordinary. The other room is the battle room. I really don't like to call it the battle room because it really is the call to prayer. And it's what's going on from December of 1814 through the end of January, through when General Jackson gets here, when Father Dubourg issues a mandate. We're under martial law. Nobody can move around. Bishop Dubourg says, or Father Dubourg says, he's going to mandate 3 days of public prayer. Andrew Jackson says, that's terrific, print it, send it out so that people have something to do while they're under lockdown. The other 2 rooms, one of them is the history of how Our Lady of Prompt Succor got here and what that entailed, why that is so miraculous as far as the battle is concerned. And our very last room highlights the 11 churches in the state of Louisiana that are under the patronage and the title of Our Lady of Prompt Succor. So that's it.
So then your favorite part
My
of this whole
favorite
thing.
part. Well, you know, I grew up, I'm an Ursuline graduate. So when you asked before, how long have you been doing this? Yes, it's a year of prep. But I've probably been doing this since I was 5 years old for the Ursulines.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I started in kindergarten, 13 years of being at Ursuline. So it's a story that comes very easily for me because it's ingrained in who I am as a woman. So the parts that I found the most fascinating is the surprises of even Our Lady of Prompt Succor, how she helped guide part of this exhibit. Finding Joseph Oconway, who I didn't know existed by looking at Dubourg's biography, and that naval officer and his writing. The fact that he received a letter from Elizabeth Ann Seton and says, I don't know anybody else in the city except Dubourg. I needed something about the Te Deum. I went up, we had just painted the wall that said, Our Lady of Prompt Succor, hasten to help us. I was really struggling with that wall of what to put in the case underneath it. And I went upstairs, and in a small little nook was a box, and in the box was an envelope, and I pulled it out. And it was the directory from 1823 for the city. And as I opened it up, the back has medical, it's falling apart, but the one page that I'm looking at has the medical societies of Louisiana, and Joseph Oconway is listed as treasurer. So he's sort of there, and as I open the middle of it, there's a description of the cathedral, and then it says, in this church, the victory over the British is annually commemorated by Te Deum on the 8th of January. And it was at 10:30 at night on a Thursday evening. When I'm struggling with and that was last Thursday, right when we're a week before we opened, and it was just there, and I really sometimes think, writing that on there.
So tell us, if someone was to come and just take in this rich history, what would be some recommendations for them as far as time and how to get more information?
Well, you can spend anywhere from a half an hour to 2 hours in here. You certainly need an hour. If you want to read and really understand, learn the history, feel the spirituality of what's going on, I would give myself a good hour. We're open Monday through Thursday from 10 to 4. And admission is $10, and of course there are discounts for senior citizens and groups and students, etc.
Yeah, this is amazing. Well, thank you so much for all that you've done and the work that you're doing, and hope you give a lot of tours. I hope people come and see you and hear this story, because it really brings everything together and it's beautiful. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And when we come back on Issues in Faith, we'll learn more about the history of the Catholic Cultural Heritage Center. This is Issues in Faith on LAE.
We placed the statue of Our Lady of Prompt Succor on the altar, and our sisters made a promise that if the city gained victory, we would sing every year a solemn Mass in thanksgiving.
The heart of Woman's New Life Center is its outreach to women in unplanned pregnancies, especially those who are seeking an abortion. Our professional counseling services, combined with free ultrasound tests, provide each woman with the nurturing she needs while also revealing her unborn child to her. For more information about the life-saving work of Woman's New Life Center, call 504-831-3117 or visit womansnewlife.com.
We're back at the Old Ursuline Convent Museum, and I'm joined by Barbara Turner-Windhorst, the chair of the Catholic Cultural and Heritage Center. Thank you so much, Barbara, for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
We always enjoy our conversations talking about the contributions of the Catholic Church through the Cultural Heritage Center, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary officially this year.
And that's really hard to believe that it's been 10 years now. And it's particularly hard to believe because I've been chair that entire time. I worked very closely with Monsignor Crosby Kearns, who most people know is deceased now, but this was a passion for him. And it began as a result under Archbishop Hughes as well, but it was during the time when the Pope was declaring that the church should be an incubator, that it should be an incubator for life of the cultural heritage of the church, that we should think about sharing that with other people, that we shouldn't just go to church on Sundays, come out of the parking lot and go home.
Right.
That we should have something that tells the story. And in New Orleans, we are uniquely blessed by the fact that the story of New Orleans is the story of the Catholic Church.
It's so true. And I mean, throughout history, the global history, you can see the Catholic Church has contributed to so much. But here in New Orleans, it is very special. The histories are intertwined. We're actually celebrating much of that with the exhibit that we're here. But tell us about getting started. What was it like in those beginning days? And I know working with Monsignor Kern to get this moving and that first celebration that you had.
Well, it was also working with Dr. Charles Nolan, who was the archivist at that time. Dr. Lee Loomis is now the archivist. But Dr. Nolan and Monsignor Kern and I sat down, and it was our responsibility to write a mission statement and a vision statement, and to write a little bit of something about what it was we thought this should be under the tutelage of Archbishop Hughes. And we were able to do that with that sense of, you don't have to be Catholic in New Orleans. You know, I mean, it is really, when you look at what Mardi Gras is, when you look at what this Old Ursuline Convent is, when you look at the history and you look at the joy that was the Catholic Church. The first Mardi Gras parade, they like to say, was the one when the nuns left this building and went down in their horse-drawn carriages and moved all their stuff down to what was called the plantation, where they lived until the canal was cut through. The industrial canal came along and was cut through there. So thinking of those nuns, when they first got on that ship, that gave us the courage to be able to think of what do we want to tell the people not only of New Orleans and Louisiana, but the rest of the multitude of visitors who come throughout the world to visit the Old Ursuline Convent.
Well, and that brings up a lovely point. So many people go through the cathedral and visit the cathedral. It's such a symbol of New Orleans. It's home, spiritual home for so many Catholics, 500,000 Catholics, but it is that piece that centers so many and that is so recognizable. And the convent and the cathedral all are a complex, so to speak, that celebrates the contributions of the Catholic Church in society. How did this building become really the heart of that celebration?
Well, the Catholic Cultural Heritage Center really encompasses St. Mary's Church, which is connected to the convent here, the convent itself, St. Louis Cathedral, and St. Anthony's Garden, which is right behind the cathedral. And looking at that complex of entities, I laughingly tell Archbishop Aymon that if he could copyright the cathedral's picture, he would be able to make a fortune, because everybody who comes to New Orleans, whether they are national newsmakers or whether they're just a tourist from Iowa wanting a picture, every single person wants a picture of the cathedral. And we're one of the few cities in the world that you recognize that this is New Orleans without saying a word if you just flash a picture of St. Louis Cathedral. So this Cultural Heritage Center here is designed to help people understand that we have streets named after nuns in this city. And when you think about the Ursuline nuns on that ship, and you think about their coming all this way and the bad weather that they had, and they didn't have a clue where they were going, we decided that if they could bear all of that, then we could bear the responsibility and the joy of trying to look at what the future holds. Because we want young people, we want students to come through here. We want them to have a sense of appreciation and a sense of pride about their church, about their faith. So we're encouraging young people. I think Ursuline itself is going to have a retreat here for its seniors very soon. And we have a gift shop. The gift shop speaks to the whole issue of what this is all about. We have things that are easily packed in somebody's suitcase so they can take it back home with them. But everybody who comes here walks away with a sense of awe, thinking to themselves, we are in a building right now, Sarah, that has just got incredible history. And our Ursuline nuns brought with them the determination to educate women. That was unheard of.
Yes.
That was unheard of.
The children of the European settlers as well as the free people of color. It was the birth of Catholic education in New Orleans.
Well, it was a universal education. It was open to everyone, whether they were slave girls or whether they were Creoles or whether they were European ancestry or whoever they were. You know very well that Canal Street was the dividing line between the Europeans and the French, but they took in everybody and they educated them all. And when they made an act of donation here, one of the things they most wanted was to make sure that the young women who had been receiving an education would continue to do so. So every year when on January 8th, the Te Deum is sung, and the bishops and the archbishop are over on State Street at the shrine in order to celebrate the history, is that commitment that people have made over and over and over again. And people who are not even Catholic appreciate the fact that this city would not be what it is without the contributions of the Ursulines and the Catholic Church.
And we are going to be running short on time, but I want you to tell me, in the 10 years that you've been involved at the Catholic Cultural Heritage Center, what memories have you made that stand out the most for you?
Well, not only the beginning, but also the mosaic exhibition, the Vatican mosaics when they came. And that was Monsignor Kern's dream, and that really was his heartbeat. And I have a very special memory of Monsignor Kern. But I've been very blessed to not only work with Monsignor Kern, but now to work with Father Philip Landry, who is a wonderful man with whom to work. He's the person who's in charge of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But he's a great guy, and he's pursuing that dream and making sure it stays what it's supposed to be.
And giving it new life.
And giving it brand new life.
Well, Barbara, I want to thank you for your 10 years of service, commitment, and really, in some ways, a ministry to keeping focus on the contributions of the Catholic Church to our wonderful city, and also congratulate you as you are the recipient of the Cardinal Marquesano Award this year.
I was very surprised and humbled by that, but this has been a passion for me, as you can tell. It's something I love.
Yes, you can tell it's a passion. Again, thank you so much for being with us, spending some time with us once again, and we'll be right back with more Issues in Faith from the Old Ursuline Convent.
Let the bright example of Louisianian glory be caught throughout the eastern rebellious states. Let them learn what immortal honors have been gained by the heroes of New Orleans.
And welcome back. We're actually here again at the prayer room, the call to prayer, the battle room, and we're going to walk through some of the pieces here. And this is just very inspiring in the history of these pieces. Tell the story, as we said earlier, the Catholic story of what was going on during this battle. So start us off.
Sure. So in this room, there's a great chronology about what's happening and how it's happening. So we've laid it out that way. So the first thing that we visit is that call to prayer from Father Dubourg. He issues 3 days of prayer. He issues it on January the 18th. It is read at morning and evening Mass, and they begin 3 days of solemn prayer.
All right, so the prayer begins, and now where we go?
The prayer begins, and then our next board is really about how history is recorded in our sacramental records. So what's really interesting is throughout our baptisms and our marriages and our record books, that's what you think about. You're just writing, today I baptized somebody. Well, in the margins, specifically this margin, these are in Spanish, it says the 23rd of December, 1814, the British have landed or have been discovered at the plantation of Mr. Villeray. So there he is right there. And then a couple of weeks later, or a week later, here's the note. For the 8th of January, the Americans, the combat, the battle against, from the Americans to the English, and that we were victorious. So they recorded that across several of our sacramental registers, and each one appears at least 3 times in those pages of those books. Our next board has to do with the battle itself, and it is January the 8th, 1815, and this passage comes from the annals, the history of the Ursulines. It's written in French, and it does tell us that the 8th of January, while all of the community was in this great consternation over the battle, that when the attack was happening and anyone that could bear arms went to the battlefield, the sisters, the pious women, and both black and white, went to the chapel to pray. And that during communion, during the Mass that Father Dubourg was saying, a messenger ran in and declared, "Victory is ours," which is when everyone from Mass immediately begins singing the Te Deum, which is that promise that we still keep now, singing that Te Deum on January the 8th. So the next board is Joseph O'Conway, and we tell the story here about his letters and also his words that ring true that he wrote shortly after the battle. Let them learn what immortal honors have been gained by the heroes of New Orleans. Our next board really talks about what the Ursulines did. So after the battle was over, there's wounded, not only the American casualties, which are very few, but the thousands of British that were wounded and that needed help. And the convent here itself reverts back to a hospital, a 50-bed hospital to nurse the soldiers. Our last 2 boards talk about Jackson and what Jackson did with Dubourg. This is the top one here is from the Library of Congress, and it is from the original letter books of Andrew Jackson. He writes to Dubourg, asking Dubourg to plan a celebration after the battle. He wants a grand celebration at the cathedral on January 23rd. So he writes that, and then the next part of that is Dubourg's speech at the cathedral to General Jackson. What's interesting is when you look at the to him, he's not talking about Jackson. He's talking about God Almighty. To him we give our thanks for sending us the general.
You really see this deep spiritual movement in everybody in this battle, on the soldier side, on the nuns, but also on the leaders, realizing and recognizing the power of prayer and the need for God's help in this moment.
It is. And our we have Bishop Dubourg, who, this is his official portrait. He was actually Louis Guillaume Valentin Dubourg. He was born in Saint-Domingue, which is present-day Haiti. And then the last board is the Jackson visiting the Ursulines. We know that Jackson visited the Ursulines on at least 2 occasions, one shortly after the battle, and then one later in 1828. And this board just depicts that beautifully. This would not have been at this convent, the second visit, but it would have been the convent on Dauphine Street, which is now the Industrial Canal. But that is when he went to visit them. We wanted to be able to show Jackson and just how all of this intertwines, the people that knew each other, and Dubourg, the sisters, Jackson, Oconway, you know, it is all an integral part of what the city is going through.
Praise God. And so now we conclude with the wall, the timeline of everything, correct?
Well, the timeline, yeah, victory is ours, and certainly that was the cry that happened while they were in communion, to be able to know that that's what had happened. But the timeline really tells us from December through the end of January of what was going on. And the battle map that is on the wall was done by one of the Ursulines, that as she was writing the biography and the history of the Ursulines, she created that map. So we were able to blow it up onto this wall to show what was going on.
So it was very important for the Ursulines to hold on to this message, this history, and to help document it throughout the years. And it's amazing that we get to do this today.
It's the miracle of Our Lady of Prompt Succor,
yeah.
You know, and it's the continuous miracle of understanding that she saved the city through that power of prayer and through her intercession and her guidance that we have always prayed to for the last 200 years.
Again, thank you so much for this. This is just one of many rooms that people will be able to walk through and see and learn and be able to see for themselves. So we definitely recommend everybody to come and see this great work. And we'll be back with more on Issues in Faith.
We must not forget that victory, like defeat, is principally in the hands of the supreme arbiter of human destiny. To him our most fervent thanks are due for our late unexpected rescue, and it is him we chiefly intend to praise.
And we leave you from the historic Old Ursuline Convent Museum here in the French Quarter, New Orleans. Don't forget, you can join the conversation by liking us on Facebook or emailing us at issuesinfaith@WLAE.com.
And that's our show. Thanks so much for watching. Take care and God bless.